computer science is not software engineering. My name is Aman. I'm a former software engineer and career coach who's worked at companies like Amazon and Shopify. And now I help you land your dream job in tech. In college, I studied computer science, did 5 software engineering internships, and the day after I graduated college, I started at a 6-figure full-time software engineering job. In this video, I'm going to break down the lie that you've all been told, that computer science is equivalent to software engineering. You're going to learn why people frequently make this mistake, and the things you as a computer science major must do on top of your computer science degree to land a high-paying job in software engineering. Okay, first of all, before I tell you why people think computer science is equivalent to software engineering, let me ask you a question. If you saw a man on the street and he was wearing a suit, tie, and holding a briefcase, would you think he was a lawyer? Most of you guys probably would, because a person who looks exactly like the stereotype of a lawyer is probably a lawyer, or at least that's what your brain tells you. And this is called a representative heuristic. A representative heuristic is a cognitive shortcut where you make a judgment based off of how much one thing resembles another. Essentially, it's about estimating likelihood of an event by comparing it to a prototype in our mind. Instead of using strict logic, you're judging based off of similarity. Another example would be, let's say someone says they're a YouTuber. You might immediately think, oh, they're like Mr. Beast or Ryan Trahan. Instead of building from first principles and thinking, okay, what percentage of YouTubers are entertainment YouTubers, you just use whatever first comes to mind, the stereotype of a YouTuber, to assess what they probably look like. And this is exactly why people think computer science is software engineering. If you imagine what a software engineer does all day, most people would imagine someone who sits behind a desk, behind a laptop, and just codes. And similarly, right, if you look at a computer science student, I guess if you think about what they do, they spend a lot of time behind their computer coding. So therefore, they must be the same, right? And that's the fundamental mismatch. See, it also comes from the fact that before you enter the computer science degree, before you're a software engineer, you really have no conception of what a software engineer or a computer science student actually does, other than what you see with your eyes, which is someone who sits behind a computer and codes. So you see them as exactly the same thing. And by the title of this video, you already know that my stance is that they're not the same thing. But let me drive home a few more examples to illustrate this point further. Studying computer science is like studying literature, and being a software engineer is like being an author. Sure, there's some level of overlap, but the day-to-day of both of those things are completely different. Listen, when you're studying literature, you're spending a lot of time reading historical works. You're writing, sure, but you're writing analysis of some other work that's already been created. Whereas when you're an author, you probably spend all day long just writing and editing what you've already written. Usually you're writing much longer works, whether it's 100, 200, 300 page long book. See, someone might see a literature student typing an essay and an author writing a book and equate those things as the same, when they're completely different. Another analogy would be thinking that statistics is the same thing as data science. Like, statistics is the science of organizing, collecting, presenting data. And while data science uses a ton of statistics principles, they're in no way the same thing. And we get to this fundamental point that doing a statistics degree is not enough to become a data scientist because they're not the same thing. So let me ask you, right? Why do people pick computer science if they're interested in software engineering, given that they're not one-to-one? Well, it all comes down to the college preparation fallacy. It's this idea that college leads directly to your job. So if you want to do a specific job, awesome. Just work backwards, look at the list of majors, and pick whatever major looks the most similar to that job. That's how you get a job, right? And we're going to get into exactly why that's completely failed logic later on, but that's the issue here. It's a situation where you look at a list of options on the university's website, you don't see anything that's remotely similar to software engineering other than computer science because both of people code, right? So you just end up picking computer science if you want to be a software engineer. Again, it's also like layman's, friends, family, they'll all tell you, hey, you should probably do computer science, right? Even though most of them are not in the field of software engineering, nor do they know anything about coding. So what are the differences between computer science and software engineering? Computer science is a study of computers and computational systems. In simple terms, it's about understanding how computers work, how to use them to solve problems, and how to create software. Some of the major aspects are data structures, algorithms, theory of computation, cryptography, logic, tons of theoretical concepts. Whereas software engineering is technically a branch of computer science focused on developing software, creating applications. It's about applying engineering principles to software creation to ensure that it's reliable, sustainable, and meets user needs. Again, it's an application of computer science to write code and software for business purposes. You apply stuff you learn in computer science towards software engineering. Now, should you study computer science if you want to do software engineering? My answer here is yes, but it's not enough. If you want to be a software engineer, sure, I think doing a computer science major is a good way to go about doing that. See, a computer science major is a really good base to launch off of. It gives you a great network, it teaches you all of these technical concepts pretty well, and at the end of the day, it's one of the highest paid majors you can possibly do. But the larger issue here that I touched on earlier is that college preparation fallacy. The idea that college is the end-all be-all, that your entire life is all about getting into a good college, and once you've gotten into a good college, everything is set for you. Everything's handed on a silver platter. Now, this was the environment that our parents grew up in, right? These people grew up in the 80s and 90s, and back then, all you needed to do was go to college. So that's the message that our parents have passed down to us. And the problem is that that is no longer the case. About 10 years ago, former President Obama addressed the college preparation fallacy.
Now, everybody understands some form of higher education is a necessity. And that's a good thing, which means more folks are enrolling and more folks are seeking the skills that they'll need to compete. But if they're enrolling and not getting the skills that they need, then we're not delivering on the promise. I'm glad that everybody wants to go to college.
You hear what he's saying, right? He's saying that college is a necessity in the world of today, but it has to actually work. It's awesome that more people are going to college, but we need to think about, okay, what is the reason that more people are going to college? And it's good that more people are going to college only if that college education actually does something for them. See, even back then, even a decade ago when Obama made that speech, people were making the fundamental mistake of thinking that if they took on $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 of debt and went to college, all of a sudden their life would be fine. They saw college as a magic bullet that solves all of your problems. And the fundamental mistake is that they end up coming out of college realizing that they're doing a job that they could have gotten anyway. Statistically speaking, almost half of people do a job that their college degree isn't actually helping them do. And this issue was there 10 years ago, yet people still don't get this. There is still a massive obsession with the top colleges. People would kill to get their kid into Harvard or Stanford or MIT, thinking that that Harvard acceptance, that Stanford acceptance letter is all you need for a golden, beautiful life. They see college as the end-all be-all. By the way, some of you guys know that I've recently entered the game of entrepreneurship, so for the past 3 to 6 months, I've been really working on my business. And a book that's been helping out a lot with that is $1 Million Weekend by Noah Kagan. The surprisingly simple way to start a 7-figure business in 48 hours. $1 Million Weekend is probably the best book for beginners who are trying to get into entrepreneurship and making money online in 2024. It's written by Noah Kagan, who's a serial entrepreneur, investor, and worth about $35 to $40 million right now. He was early at Facebook, Mint.com, and now he runs AppSumo, the sponsor of today's video. Now, some of the biggest lessons from $1 Million Weekend are that entrepreneurship is on a spectrum. So you don't just wake up one day and start $1 million company. You need to slowly progress, whether it's making your first $10, $100, $1,000. Once you work through all those stages, then you can get to that $1 million company. Now, once you do start your business and you're looking for useful software to help run it, AppSumo is the best place to find that. It's a marketplace of thousands of tools that entrepreneurs are using all around the world to run their small business. Whether you need an appointment booking software, TidyCal's got you covered, or a newsletter app, they have SendFox. AppSumo is the best place to buy software online because it's always at one fixed price rather than recurring monthly subscription. There's tons of software that fulfill all of these needs, but it's always at $15, $20, $30, $40 a month recurring for infinity. Whereas AppSumo's apps are just one fixed price, which means you'll save hundreds and thousands of dollars in the long term. You can get $1 Million Weekend for $7 at AppSumo. It's still listed there, whereas on Amazon it's $18. So if you want the knowledge to start a $1 million company, go ahead and get $1 Million Weekend on AppSumo. Thank you to AppSumo for sponsoring this video. Honestly, as I've gotten more and more into business and studying branding, I've realized that Harvard has the greatest brand of any business in the world. Nothing even comes close. See, you don't realize that essentially Harvard is just a business, and it's an incredibly successful business. I mean, that $50 billion endowment and investment portfolio, that didn't just come out of nowhere. No, Harvard pulled the greatest con in our society, where it convinced you that it was the greatest honor that anyone could bestow to you to allow you to pay someone $200,000. Think about that, right? It is people's best day of their life when they open a letter where a business is instructing them, you're now allowed to pay me $200,000, here's how you pay it. That's what an acceptance letter is. And once I realized this, right, I always wondered to myself, why is Harvard so restrictive? I mean, it's definitely not about the material, right? Like all of Harvard's lectures are already online and just get the information that way. And it's not about classroom sizes. I mean, there are universities out there which are 1/20th the price of Harvard that have much more classroom space and are doing just fine. So why not just let anybody pay $200,000 and get a Harvard education? And I mean, a business like Apple doesn't stop you from buying a MacBook. If anyone has $1,000, they can just buy a MacBook or an iPhone. And the reason Harvard is so restrictive is because if everyone can get into Harvard, no one gets into Harvard.
Everyone can be super. And when everyone's super, no one will be.
It always comes back to The Incredibles. If everyone's a superhero, no one's a superhero. What Harvard is selling, it is in no way, shape, or form the education. In fact, they've done studies where they've taken kids who have gotten into Harvard but instead chose to go to a state school and compared those kids to Harvard kids, and their career outcomes are exactly the same. What Harvard is selling, what you're paying $200,000 for, is the fact that Harvard picked you out of the tens of thousands of applicants you were let in. So that makes me think, right? The optimal situation is just get into Harvard and then just don't go. That way you're getting the best of both worlds. I mean, look at someone like Mark Zuckerberg, right? He got into Harvard and dropped out and made Facebook, which is over $1 trillion company. Now, I'm so happy that finally, as a society, we're getting to the point where we realize that college is just not all that. And while college can give you a really good foundation, can really prepare you for the world, it is not a one-to-one connection. You don't just walk into college and walk out with a college degree and that immediately leads to a high-paying job. It's just not enough. So that brings me to the question, what do you need to do on top of your computer science degree to become a successful software engineer? So you need to treat CS as one part of a larger formula, which is the formula of software engineering. So there are 3 major things to do outside of your degree to prepare you for the workplace. And the first one, the most obvious one, is getting internships. If you do a computer science degree and you have 2 or 3 software engineering internships, that itself is enough to get a good job in software engineering. So what's the value of internships, right? Effectively, you have 3 or 4 months where you are working as a software engineer while you're in college. And when you do work as a software engineer, you end up picking up skills that no computer science class will possibly teach you. It's completely different. And I'll give you a really trivial example, right? When I was in college, we learned a little bit about Git, but in no class did we actually go in depth on Git because it just wasn't necessary, right? In what context are you working with 10, 20, 30 individuals who are all merging code in the same files and the same folders, and you have to have some kind of version control system? It's just not a thing. But as soon as I did my internships, every single company in the world is using some version of Git. So it took me 2 or 3 internships where I had to learn Git on the job. And then when I had my full-time job out of college, I was already very familiar with Git. Whereas another one of the engineers joined my full-time company. He was able to get the job without doing many internships, surprisingly. And he actually had to pick up Git on the job. And it was actually quite difficult for him for the first couple months because he just wasn't familiar with it. Now, he ended up being fine later on, but that is one example of experience that you just don't get in your classes. Something as simple as Git, they don't teach it in a computer science degree. You have to do it on the job. Another value of doing internships is the fact that a lot of people get their first job from a return offer. You go to your internship, you do a really good job, and they extend you a return offer to come back full-time. And that can sometimes be a lot easier than just cold applying and going through the full interview process without the internship to back you up. So those are some reasons why doing internships is of the utmost importance to your computer science degree. Now, another thing that I believe most computer science students should do if they want to become a software engineer, something I think is pretty slept on, is doing hackathons. Again, it comes down to the fundamental idea that when you do hackathons, when you build something, whether it's in a software engineering internship or career context, or it's amongst a team of 3 to 4 people in a hackathon, you pick up on skills that you will never learn in your computer science degree. I did a handful of hackathons last year and they changed my life because in 24 hours, I went from knowing literally nothing about skills like Docker, PlanetScale, and having to implement them in a project with deadlines with a team there. That experience taught me a ton that my classes simply would never have. Hackathons also give you something to write down in your resume. So let's say you do 2 or 3 hackathons, right? You're probably going to pick up 3 to 5 new technologies, frameworks, skills. You can add that to the skills section of your resume, and then you can also add the hackathon to your resume. And it's also a lot of fun. Like winning a hackathon was one of my favorite experiences my senior year of college. It was a situation where I did my first hackathon, I completely failed, I crashed and burned, and then I spent 1, 2, 3 months training for the next one. Put together a team beforehand, discussed ideas beforehand, really worked on building up the skills, and then when we walked in, we actually did a lot better. Finally, the third element of something you can do on top of your computer science degree to really build out your resume is research. I see research as something that's more valuable if you're going into academia, but it can still be helpful, especially because of the fact that software engineering internships are actually very difficult to get. So if you can email some professors, maybe go through a research program at your university, that's a really good backup option to help fill out your resume. See, you have to do those 3 things on top of your computer science degree if you want any chance in this market, because computer science is not software engineering. Now, I actually made a complete guide on how I would get a software engineering internship in 2024. If I had to do it again, you can watch that right here. That's my complete process. People have said that video's changed their lives. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.